She slammed her hand onto the terminal glass, just as the jet bridge's metal ramp retracted with a grinding groan, trapping the last passenger, her, in the narrow gap between departure and denial. The airport manager, Mr. Ellis, hovered behind the counter, arms folded, eyes cold beneath the fluorescent glare. He did not hesitate. "Miss Carter," he said, voice steely, "I'm sorry, your flight is closed. You missed the final boarding call." A hot wave of panic and disbelief washed over her. Every second counted now. The neon sign overhead blinked seat, but only for those who arrived on time. She'd sprinted through security after helping a mother with a stroller, then navigated a tangle of wheelchairs in Seagate. At the doorway to gate C23, she'd seen the door sliding shut, and then nothing. "Please," she begged, voice trembling, "there must be something you can do. I'm their new director. I start today." Ellis's lips twitched into something like amusement. "You're what?" Her heart thudded. She dipped her chin, swallowing bile. The boarding agent behind Ellis exchanged a glance with the gate supervisor. A low murmur spread among the waiting travelers. "I was promoted last week. Human Resources faxed your office this morning. You should have the memo." Her voice gained strength in that moment, authority she hadn't felt before. Ellis glanced down at his clipboard. Behind him, the automated voice piped up. "Final call to gate C23. Flight 427 to Melbourne is now closing." He tapped a pen. "No memo here." She lunged forward. "You have my credentials on file, please check. I can show you my ID." He shook his head without looking up. "I've made my decision." With that, he pressed a button. The boarding door slipped shut. The glass partition clicked into place. She stared at the sealed tunnel, stunned. Her throat felt raw as she whispered, "You've made a mistake." He offered her a clipboard with a form. "Here's your denial slip. You can catch the red eye." She ripped it from his hand and crumpled it against the cold glass. The next moment, a soft voice called her name from the back of the crowd. "Emily." She turned. A tall man in a sharp suit pushed through the throng, carrying an envelope stamped "Urgent." Recognition struck her like lightning. "Mr. Pierce," she said, catching her breath. "You made it." He glanced at her hand holding the form. His eyes narrowed. "What's that?" Before she could answer, Ellis strode over, blocking her path. "Who are you, sir?" Pierce opened the envelope. "The new regional director." "Emily, a heads up. Your transfer papers went to the wrong office." He held up 2 crisp letterhead pages. "Head office to Hong Kong, not here." Ellis's face turned ashen. He stammered, I apologize, Mr. Director." Emily's pulse raced. The furious humiliation that had been building crashed down all at once. She leaned close so only Ellis could hear. "You'll personally get me on that flight, or every passenger in this terminal will hear about how an airport manager cost his new director her job before she ever arrived." Ellis looked around. The other travelers watched with rapt attention. His jaw clenched. He flicked through his clipboard, brow furrowed. Minutes stretched into eternity. Emily's chest tightened. She fought not to tremble. Her promotion had been the culmination of years, late nights, boardroom battles, systems overhauls, all to lead operations across Asia or Pacific, and now, stranded in Auckland Airport, minutes away from Dubai, just because of one lousy misfiled fax. At last, Ellis's shoulders slumped. He nodded to the boarding agent. The glass doors rumbled open. The jet bridge extended again. "Go," Ellis muttered. Voice hollow. Emily marched forward, clutching her passport and boarding pass. Behind her, Pierce caught her arm. "Sit tight," he said. "I need to talk to Ellis." She hesitated, then followed Pierce back to the counter. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Ellis, you realize this isn't just another flyer. Miss Carter's overseeing all your regional staff. That's a budget of 50 million, and you refused her boarding." Ellis swallowed hard. "I thought she was a late arrival." Pierce's gaze cut through him. "You thought wrong." Emily's stomach twisted. This was more than embarrassment. It was betrayal. The one person tasked with facilitating travel within her network had nearly derailed her career before it began. Pierce slid the envelope across. The desk should need a formal apology in writing, and a transfer voucher to Sydney. She board flight 512 in 30 minutes. Ellis's eyes darted to the monitors behind them. That flight's fully booked. Pierce smiled thinly. Booked funny, I see 3 empty seats. He stood straighter. You will accommodate her? Ellis nodded. Defeated. Emily stepped away, heart pounding. She boarded the shuttle to the tarmac, finally free of the terminal's glare. As the vehicle hummed forward, she pressed her lips together, fury and relief warring inside her. Outside, the plane's massive wings glinted under the afternoon sun. She would make it to Melbourne by midnight. She would walk into headquarters on Monday morning as their new director, but every second she'd lost gnawed at her. She climbed the steps into the cabin. The flight attendant paused, ready to close the door. Emily held up the boarding pass. Director Carter, the attendant said, eyes widening. Welcome aboard. Emily exhaled. She sank into her seat by the window. Her phone buzzed. A text from HR. Good luck, boss. She stared out at the runway, memories of the entire debacle flashing through her mind. The look on Ellis's face, the packed terminal, Pierce's inflamed expression. Then the plane jolted. Wheels reversed. Engines roared as Flight 512 taxied toward the runway. Emily's gaze locked on the glass of her window, the reflection of a woman who would not be dismissed, but miles above the clouds. Her phone lit up again. A single message. From an unknown number. You think that was the worst of it? Wait until you see what I have planned for your first day. Emily's blood ran cold. She stared at the screen, heart hammering. What did he mean? Who was behind this warning? And how deep did this betrayal go? Emily Carter's heel hit the polished tile floor with a sharp click as she burst through the sliding glass doors of Auckland International Airport. Behind her, the late afternoon sunlight glinted off rows of empty check-in pods and silent baggage. Carousels ahead, the gate C-23 display blinked closed. Every muscle in her body tensed. Her chest pounded as she sprinted past the cafe's half-shut counters and the last dozen travelers seated in front of gate C-23. She recognized the airport manager, Douglas Ellis, standing at the counter with his back to her. His dark suit was crisply ironed, but his posture was relaxed, too relaxed. Emily's voice caught in her throat as she skidded to a stop in front of him. Mr. Ellis, she gasped. I'm sorry I'm late. Please, you have to open the gate. Ellis turned slowly. His lined face was set in a calm mask of authority. I'm sorry, Miss Carter. Flight 512 to Melbourne closed 30 seconds ago. She swallowed, tasting bile. But I'm the new regional director. I start my first day on Monday in Melbourne. Ellis raised an eyebrow. I have no record of that. Emily pressed a hand against the counter, leaning in. Human Resources sent a fax this morning. They confirmed my transfer. Ellis glanced at his clipboard, then back at her. No memo, no fax, no booking. He tapped a printed manifest. All seats are taken. Her heart sank, then flickered with defiance. She reached into her leather tote and pulled out her ID badge sleek card, embossed with the company logo and her name. Here. Ellis studied the badge under the harsh fluorescent light. If this is true, he said slowly, then the paperwork clearly went to the wrong office. He sighed, tucking the badge into his jacket pocket. Even so, rules are rules. I can't reopen the gate. The automated final boarding call crackled overhead. Flight 512 to Melbourne now, closed. All remaining passengers were denied boarding. Panic blurred Emily's vision. Every eye in the terminal tracked her. She forced her voice steady. You don't understand. This is my job. I've worked for years for that seat. A hush fell. In the back of the crowd, a man in a tailored suit pushed forward. He held a sealed envelope stamped urgent. Dark hair fell over his forehead, and his grey eyes locked onto Emily's. Emily. His voice was calm but urgent. You'll want to see this. Hope and dread tangled in her chest. She reached for the envelope. Ellis frowned. And who are you? He demanded. He flicked open the flap and withdrew to crisp pages of letterhead paper. Regional Director, Asia Pacific. He read aloud, effective immediately. He turned to Ellis. You were supposed to receive these by email, but they misfiled everything here. Ellis's face paled. He blinked at the pages, then back at Emily. His authority wavered. I apologize. Let me see what I can do. Emily exhaled, relief flooding through her veins. She straightened, But the tsunami of emotions, embarrassment, rage, fear swirled inside her. Ellis tapped at a terminal. Moments stretched like hours. The boarding door silently slid open. Emily felt every head in the terminal swivel toward her. "Go," Ellis muttered, voice low. She seized her roller bag and bolted forward. The jet bridge loomed ahead like a metal snake coiled around the plane's door. She stepped into its narrow confines just as Ellis called. "Wait." She paused, hand on the railing. "Yes." Ellis's shoulders slumped. "I can get you on another flight at midnight. This one is full." She forced a nod. "Thank you." The door hissed closed behind her. She glanced back just as Ellis returned to his clipboard, head bowed in remorse. Inside the aircraft cabin, a flight attendant guided her down the aisle. "Director Carter?" she asked, voice soft. "Welcome aboard." Emily offered a small, grateful smile. She sank into the window seat at 14A and buckled in. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow. Outside the tiny oval window, the golden haze of evening sky stretched to the runway edge. Her phone buzzed. A message from HR. "Congrats. See you Monday. Safe travels." She scrolled, but another buzz cut through the airport's roar. An anonymous text. "You think missing this flight was bad? Wait until Monday." Her skin prickled as her pulse raced. Who would send that? The attendant passed by, checking overhead bins. Emily's bag rattled as she lifted it, nearly dropping her boarding pass. Her hands trembled. She tucked her phone away. The jet bridge retracted, and the wheels reversed with a grinding shudder. Engines droned to life. Emily's window rattled. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself. She replayed every misstep. The misfiled paperwork, Ellis's careless denial, the embarrassing moment in front of colleagues, and now a threat ominous. With a click, the seatbelt sign blinked off. The flight attendant took her seat across the aisle. "Can I get you anything?" she asked. Emily shook her head, voice tight. "No, thank you." The plane taxied into position. A hush fell. Then the engines roared. With a final lurch, the aircraft surged forward, hurtling down the runway. Emily felt the familiar pressure in her ears as they lifted off. The terminal shrank below, a maze of concrete and lights. She held on to the armrests until the wings leveled, and the city lights blurred into the horizon. Around her, other passengers settled in for the flight, businessmen scrolling tablets, families with sleeping children. None of them knew who she was or what she faced. A flicker of anger rose. She pressed her lips together. She would not let one airport manager ruin her career. She would reach Melbourne on time. She would show them she belonged in that director's chair. The flight attendant passed by again. "Dinner or snack?" Emily managed a nod. "Snack, please." Moments later, a small tray materialized. She picked at the sandwich, eyes fixed on the dark stretch beyond the window. The cabin lights dimmed further for the overnight journey. She checked her phone under the dim light. No new messages, just the one chilling line. "Wait until Monday." Her stomach clenched. Monday, that was when she would finally step into her new office. She would address the entire regional team for the first time. And now, someone threatened her before she even began. She set her phone aside and closed her eyes. The gentle hum of the engines and the soft breathing of sleeping passengers filled the cabin. She fought against the rising tide of dread. The clock on her screen blinks at 6:45 p.m. Melbourne time was 2 hours ahead, nearly 9 p.m. She had time to prepare, to strategize, to plan a response. A mile high above the earth, the flight sign blinked, "No smoking." She drew in a shaky breath. She could handle this. She had to. An hour later, she stretched her legs and glanced down the aisle. The flight attendant had dimmed the cabin for rest. She pulled her laptop from her tote and tapped it awake. The screen lit up her determined face. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she drafted emails to HR clarifying the misfiled paperwork, to the head office apologizing for any delay in her arrival, to her assistant scheduling a briefing at dawn. Each line steadied her resolve. Then she paused at the top of a blank document titled First Day Agenda. She typed the heading, then deleted it. She stared at the screen, thinking of every hurdle she had overcome to reach this point. Late nights, long flights, board meetings that lasted into dawn. Somewhere behind her, a toddler cried in his sleep. The gentle wail tugged at Emily's heart. She thought of the families depending on her, and the employees whose livelihoods she would oversee. This was more than just a job. Her phone vibrated again. She pulled it out. Breathtaking. New text. I warned you. Clean up those errors fast. She stared at the message. Someone was watching her files. Someone knew about the misfiled fax. Someone powerful enough to warn her anonymously. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She swallowed and typed a reply. I will correct every issue. But why the threats? Who is this? She hit send and watched the screen. No receipt. No typing indicator. A sudden jolt trembled through the plane as the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached cruising altitude. Feel free to move about the cabin, but please be mindful of the seatbelt sign. Emily closed her laptop. She sat back and surveyed the dim cabin. The strangers around her slept or watched screens. She was alone with her thoughts and her threat. She tucked her laptop away and clenched her fists. Whoever was behind this would learn two things on Monday. Emily Carter was not easily intimidated. She would not let her first day be ruined. She pressed a hand to her stomach, where the tight knot of fear and anticipation churned. The dark window reflected her face, eyes bright with resolve. She inhaled, exhaled. Soon, the lights would fade entirely. She would try to rest, to gather strength, but sleep felt impossible with an unseen adversary lurking. She stared at the reflection, daring Monday to come, and high above the clouds, somewhere hidden among her future colleagues or enemies, someone smirked at their success in shaking her hand, plotted their next move. Below them, the world sleepwalked into the night. Above them, Emily Carter stayed wide awake. What now? Emily Carter stepped off the jet bridge into the cool night air of Melbourne Airport, her suitcase wheels humming against the polished floor as she moved through the quiet corridor, her heart still pounding from the flight's tension and the ominous messages she had received high above the clouds. She focused on the rhythm of her breaths as she entered the arrivals hall, its bright lights and distant announcements blending into a blur unnoticed by her as she made her way to baggage claim, where a single suitcase lay waiting on the carousel. She grabbed the handle and pulled it close to her side, then headed toward the exit, where a sleek black sedan waited under the glow of the overhead lamps. Her phone buzzed again, but she ignored it, her mind racing through her plans for tomorrow. Her first day as regional director. Every step she took brought her closer to the unknown challenges that awaited and the silent observer who had already warned her of their intentions. Outside, the driver opened the rear door and bowed his head in greeting. Emily slid inside and offered a curt nod. The sedan glided through the airport driveway and onto the highway. Skyscrapers glittered in the distance, their lights reflecting her determination and her fear. As she stared out the window, she reviewed her briefing. Notes on the spreadsheet she had drafted midnight, each cell a promise of order against the chaos that threatened her career. She thought of the misfiled paperwork and the careless airport manager who had tried to derail her. She thought of the anonymous text demanding she fixed errors fast and warning of worse to come. She pressed her thumb against the cool glass of her window and whispered to herself she would not break, she would not cower. The car turned into a side street and stopped before a modern glass facade, the regional office, her new domain. Emily stepped out into the crisp air, her heels clicking on the pavement. She paused at the front doors, her reflection merging with the illuminated signage. She drew in a steadying breath and entered the lobby. A receptionist glanced up and smiled. A gentle welcome. Emily returned the gesture and moved past the desk toward the elevators. Her reflection in the polished panels showed a woman poised on the edge of transformation. Her suit pressed, her hair sleek, and her eyes bright with resolve. The elevator doors slid open, and she stepped inside. The passengers inside were strangers, yet each one felt like a potential ally or adversary. As the car rose, she rehearsed her opening remarks for the morning, addressing the leaders of marketing, operations, finance, and human resources. Each word crafted to inspire trust and confidence, and yet beneath her calm exterior, her mind raced with questions about who had sent the threatening texts and why they targeted her before she had even begun. She pressed the close button with her finger, then exhaled. The doors shut and carried her upward into uncertainty. At the top floor, the doors opened onto a corridor lined with glass offices, her destination the grand office at the end of the hall. She paused outside its door, her hand hovering over the handle. She recalled the warning, "Wait until you see what I have planned for your first day." The hairs on her arms rose. She squared her shoulders, drew in one final breath, and turned the handle, and entered the office. Lights bright and an ornate desk waiting for her behind it. An empty chair. Emily crossed the room, each step echoing like a heartbeat. She placed her suitcase beside the desk and pulled out her notebook, her gaze fixed on the door. Behind her she sensed unseen eyes watching as she would soon face the team and the hidden threat that would test her every conviction. But for now she stood at the starting line of her new life, determined to finish what she had begun and to uncover the truth before it unraveled everything she had fought forth. Dawn light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room as Emily Carter stepped inside, carrying her laptop and briefing binder, and immediately sensed the quiet tension in the hushed whispers of her new team members clustered around the long mahogany table. She offered a firm nod and began to distribute the printed agenda she had prepared mid-flight, her voice steady as she introduced herself and outlined the critical goals for the region in the coming quarter. The room remained silent until the finance director, Mr. Langford, cleared his throat and challenged her projections on revenue growth. His tone polite but skeptical. Emily welcomed the scrutiny and dove into her data, pointing to the charts she had meticulously designed. The marketing leads exchanged glances as she revealed an unexpected opportunity in the Vietnamese market. The head of operations raised a concern about logistics delays, and Emily responded with a contingency plan that drew a few surprised nods. Yet beneath the professionalism she could feel the undercurrent of doubt. Questions about her sudden arrival and her credentials lingered like shadows in the corners of the room. Halfway through her presentation the lights flickered and the projector screen went blank. Gasps rippled through the room, and Emily's heart raced as she pressed keys on her laptop, but nothing appeared on the screen. The IT specialist rose and muttered that there was no signal to the projector. Emily maintained her composure and suggested they continue without visuals. Her voice calm, though her mind raced with suspicion. Was this a simple malfunction, or a deliberate act to undermine her authority on day one? She guided the discussion through a series of verbal summaries and interactive questions, regaining the team's focus even as a chill curled in her spine. Finishing the meeting, she invited questions and one hand shot up. Jessica from Human Resources looked Emily in the eye and asked quietly where the promised transfer documents were archived. Emily felt a flash of recognition. Jessica had been present when the misfiled fax landed in the wrong inbox. She realized that the threat sender could be someone inside her own ranks. The assembled executives filed out toward their next appointments, leaving Emily alone at the table with her binder and a creeping sense of betrayal. As she gathered her things, her phone buzzed with a text that read, "You still have work to do before you can lead this team." And then the door clicked behind her and she froze, wondering who had just entered the room and whether they were friend or Emily Carter sat at her desk, her heartbeat echoing in the hushed office as she rifled through the files that had arrived in her inbox moments before the meeting sabotage. Her fingers paused over a corrupted attachment, its timestamp matching exactly the minute the projector died. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was this a prank from a disgruntled insider, or a calculated strike against her authority? She minimized the window and summoned the IT specialist Jason, whom she had met during her first hour on the job. He appeared in the doorway. His expression guarded. Emily motioned him in and pointed to the attachment, explaining her suspicions. Jason leaned over her shoulder and ran a series of tests on his tablet. Within seconds, he frowned and confirmed that the file had been tampered with before delivery. Clearly someone with internal access had manipulated it. Emily's chest tightened as she thought of the handful of people who knew her schedule and had motive to undermine her. She asked Jason to trace the source, and he promised to report back within the hour. Emily closed her laptop and paced toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The glass reflected the determined set of her jaw and the storm brewing in her eyes. She replayed the treacherous flight delay, the anonymous threats, and now this attempted digital ambush, each act pointing to a cunning adversary who seemed intent on breaking her before she could prove herself. She slid her badge across her desk, checking the access logs with a few swift taps. She noted several failed login attempts to her personal drive, all originating from an internal IP address. She flagged the address and cross-referenced it against employee records, finding it assigned to the operations manager, Mr. Gupta, who had voiced reservations about her logistics plan during the briefing. Her pulse surged with conflicted emotions. She recalled the polite nods and curt thank yous exchanged that morning. Could someone so professional harbor such betrayal? She clenched her fists and drafted an email requesting a private meeting with Mr. Gupta, then hesitated. Her instinct warned that confronting him directly might provoke retaliation. She decided instead to gather more evidence first. She rose to call security and request CCTV footage of his office door between noon and the projector failure. Jason returned with a printed report, his eyes serious. He confirmed the tampered file and warned that the intruder had also planted a low-level script to corrupt her entire presentation directory. If left unchecked, the implications were staggering. Emily nodded and instructed him to isolate her systems and begin a full security sweep. As she watched him leave, she felt a surge of resolve, mixed with dread. The enemy was close and powerful, but she would not retreat. She returned to her chair and drafted a terse directive to all department heads, ordering an immediate audit of digital security protocols. Her phone buzzed again, another text from the anonymous sender reading, "You are getting closer, but are you ready for what comes next?" Emily's breath caught, and she looked up toward the silent corridor outside. Her door was ajar, and a faint click suggested someone was slipping inside. Her heart thundered in her chest. What? No, Emily. Carter slammed her laptop shut and rose from her desk, her heart pounding as she stared at the flickering glow of the overhead lights that cast long shadows across the conference table she had just used for her 5th briefing this week. Each time she spoke, she felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing against her back, as though someone trailed her every footstep. She paced once more toward the windows and gazed down at the city lights below, trying to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. The sabotage of her presentation had revealed only the tip of the iceberg, and now the failed login attempts and the corrupted files pointed to Mr. Gupta. Yet she knew better than to trust a single suspect without incontrovertible proof. She returned to her chair and summoned Jason back to her office, whispering quietly that she needed every CCTV feed from the IT wing, as well as access logs from the executive elevator and her own secure drive. He nodded and disappeared into the labyrinth of hallways, while Emily flicked through the employee roster, seeking familiar faces. She paused over a photo of Jessica from HR, whose quiet question in the first meeting had unsettled her more than she let on. The readouts she requested would soon arrive on her screen, but as she waited, her phone vibrated. Again, another anonymous message appeared, telling her, "You're closing in, but the deeper you dig, the darker it gets." Her blood ran cold, because this time the line implied something more personal, a threat not only to her career but to her life, and she realized she was no longer safe in these glass walls. She hurried to the security office, determination flaring in her chest, each breath a vow to unmask the traitor and reclaim her power. But outside the security door she overheard hushed voices to men in uniforms trading whispered concerns and mentioning her name with a note of fear. She pressed against the doorframe, straining to overhear before they stepped into the hallway, and froze as they spotted her silhouette. Suddenly one pulled out his phone and lowered his voice, telling her, "The higher-ups want this contained." Quietly, Emily's pulse hammered. She forced a calm smile and replied in a measured tone, "I just want the truth." And when she turned away toward the elevator, she felt his gaze burn into her back, and under her breath she whispered to herself, "What now?" Elevator doors slid open, and Emily Carter stepped onto the polished marble floor of the lobby exactly 45 minutes after she'd left security, her pulse still racing from overheard whispers and the veiled warning to contain things quietly. She strode toward the glass-walled boardroom where Jason waited beside the head of security, his tablet glowing with CCTV timestamps and entry logs. She held up a hand, and he tapped the screen, showing Mr. Gupta's badge swiped at the IT wing door 5 minutes before the projector failure, then again at her office door. Minutes ago, her eyes narrowed as she studied the face reflected in the security monitor. A man who'd questioned her logistics plan now Caught red-handed in an attempt to sabotage her work, she straightened her shoulders and called for Mr. Gupta. Immediate presence within moments, a flustered Gupta appeared in the hallway, his eyes darting between her colleagues and the silent screens. Emily's voice was calm, but carried steel when she recited the swipe times and the corrupted file carried. In his credential access log, he spluttered that he was framed, that someone had stolen his badge and tailgated into the server room. But Jason's app displayed facial recognition, confirmation matching Gupta's face to every entry. Emily let the security chief speak briefly, then cut him off, insisting on a full forensic audit and his temporary suspension pending investigation. As Gupta's face paled, Emily felt the tension break like a snapped wire. Her team gathered to watch as she delivered swift but fair justice in front of them all. No hidden vendettas, no whispered alliances, just cold facts and the promise of accountability. The HR director, Jessica, stepped forward next, offering an apology for the misfiled transfer documents. She confessed that in her haste she'd forwarded Emily's papers to the wrong office, and then panicked when email confirmations bounced back. She admitted to deleting an alert to cover her mistake, but denied any threat. She'd looked shocked and ashamed beneath the bright conference room lights. Emily addressed her directly, thanking her for her honesty and instructing HR to implement new checks so no future error could threaten anyone's career. She felt relief surge through her chest, like warm sunlight breaking a storm-clouded sky. The anonymous texts had stopped now that she'd rooted out the internal saboteur, but the final piece lay in deciphering the opening threat sent on the runway in Auckland. She checked her phone and found one last message in her outbox marked unsent and dated hours before her flight. It read, "I know who you really are, and I'll make sure everyone else does too." She frowned, then realized the sender field had been her own number, a crude spoof meant to sow self-doubt. She exhaled and deleted the draft. She recognized then that the true enemy had been the fear inside her. The doubt that whispered she wasn't strong enough to lead. The moment she replaced that doubt with certainty, she found the power to overcome every challenge. Emily returned to her office and gazed at her reflection in the glass wall. Beyond lay the city she'd come to serve, and a team who now looked at her with respect, not suspicion. She opened her laptop and composed a brief company-wide message acknowledging the week's upheaval and sharing her pride in how swiftly and fairly the team had acted in the face of betrayal. Then she closed the lid and leaned back, each breath smoother than the last. She could almost feel the weight lifting from her shoulders. Outside, the sky had darkened into full night. City lights winked on like distant stars, and she reached for her phone to call Pierce in Hong Kong to thank him for his timely intervention. On day one, she tapped his name and smiled as it rang through. She spoke his name and heard his warm greeting, and for the first time since Auckland, she felt fully in control of her destiny. She would start Monday not as a newcomer haunted by threats, but as a leader tempered by trials and forged in purpose. And as the night deepened, she whispered to herself, sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you really are. And tonight, she had found Emily Carter stronger, truer, and ready to soar higher than any flight could carry her. The end.